Emily always believed that life rewarded the patient. Her 20s had been a carousel of career building and heartbreak, of watching friends fall in love while she stood quietly on the sidelines. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But when she met Nathan, it felt as if the universe had finally dealt her a winning hand. He wasn't just handsome, he was stable, smart, attentive. The kind of man who knew how to fold laundry and how to make her laugh on the worst days. Emily's parents approved. Her friends admired him. Even her sister, Elena, always the fiery, unpredictable one, seemed impressed. Nathan proposed on a brisk October evening in front of a lake that mirrored the golden leaves of fall. The ring was perfect, the moment cinematic, and Emily, at 32, finally felt that the life she'd imagined as a teenager was falling into place. Wedding plans came swiftly, a vineyard ceremony, ivory lace, soft jazz, candlelight. She even chose Elena as her maid of honor. For a while, everything felt exactly as it should, or so it seemed. Emily didn't notice the late-night texts. She had no reason to question the extra hours Nathan claimed to work, or the sudden closeness between him and her sister. Elena had always been magnetic, someone people gravitated toward, and Emily never felt threatened by it. In fact, she found comfort in how naturally Nathan seemed to bond with her family. They were going to be one, after all. But the cracks began to show in subtle ways. Emily started waking in the middle of the night with an ache she couldn't name. The feeling that something was off clung to her, invisible but persistent. She blamed it on wedding stress, the guest list, the floral arrangements, the seating chart, all those things that gnawed at a bride's peace of mind. But it wasn't the planning that kept her up, it was intuition, and it would not be ignored. One afternoon in early spring, Emily returned home unexpectedly. A cancelled client meeting had freed up her schedule, and she thought it would be a nice surprise to bring lunch to Nathan. His car was parked in its usual spot. The house was quiet. The first thing she noticed when she stepped inside was a faint trail of perfume, familiar, but not hers. The scent stopped her. It wasn't new, not entirely, but it didn't belong to her home. That subtle floral musk belonged to someone else. Still, she walked through the hallway with calm, practiced steps. She wasn't the jealous type, never had been. She rounded the corner into the living room, expecting to find Nathan on a call or asleep on the couch. What she found instead changed everything. Elena, her sister, the woman who had once held her hand through childhood nightmares, the woman she had shared secrets with, birthday cakes, and heartbreaks. And Nathan, the man who was supposed to be hers, who had promised forever, entwined on the couch in a way that required no explanation. Emily froze, the moment stretching into something timeless, something grotesque. Neither of them saw her immediately. She stood there long enough for the image to imprint itself into her memory with brutal clarity. It would visit her for years to come, in dreams and quiet moments and sudden flashbacks. It would haunt the core of who she was. When they finally noticed her presence, there was a flurry of motion, faces turning, eyes widening, mouths parting to speak. But Emily didn't hear a word. She turned and walked away. It wasn't rage that moved her. It was something colder, sharper, a kind of clarity she'd never known. She drove with steady hands and an empty mind, her thoughts trailing behind her like smoke. There was no crying, no screaming, only silence, the kind that builds just before a storm. Over the following days, Emily said nothing. Not to Nathan, not to Elena, not to anyone. She went to work, answered emails, smiled when people asked about the wedding. She maintained the illusion with terrifying precision, but underneath it all, a different version of her was waking up. The Emily that had once been soft, trusting, forgiving, that Emily was dying, and something colder was taking her place. She began documenting everything: bank statements, phone logs, social media trails. She checked timestamps, photos, locations, It wasn't hard, they'd grown comfortable, careless. There was a pattern to their betrayal, and Emily mapped it with clinical precision. She found herself revisiting moments in her mind, moments she had dismissed as ordinary. The time Nathan had come back from drinks with the guys, smelling faintly of Elena's perfume. The inside joke they had shared at the rehearsal dinner planning meeting. She saw it all now, but she didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, Emily began crafting a plan, not for revenge, but for revelation. She didn't want to scream or cry. She wanted them to feel exposed, powerless, just as she had felt in that living room. She cancelled the venue reservation without a word, quietly notified vendors, told her dressmaker there had been a change of plans. The wedding was unraveling, but Nathan hadn't noticed. He was busy spinning lies and hiding in plain sight. Emily's silence made it easy for them. That was their mistake. She had been painted as gentle, forgiving, a woman who would always take the high road. But betrayal changes people. It carves them hollow, then fills them with something unrecognizable. When Emily finally made her move, it wouldn't be loud. It would be precise and unforgettable. In the days that followed her discovery, Emily became a ghost in her own life. She moved through routines with mechanical grace, every step carefully measured, every word chosen with deliberate neutrality. At work, she smiled when necessary and laughed on cue. At home, she answered Nathan's questions with warmth that sounded real but meant nothing. Her silence wasn't passive, it was strategic, the calm before a carefully planned collapse. She didn't confront him, didn't demand answers. She already had the answers. What she needed was time. Time to shape her response into something that would sting longer than a slap, cut deeper than a screen. She wasn't interested in drama. She wanted a reckoning. Emily began collecting evidence like artifacts, screenshots of text messages that left digital fingerprints. Venmo transactions between Nathan and Elena for suspiciously vague items. Thanks for the coffee. Ride share. Last time. She scoured Elena's Instagram, noting posts that at the time had seemed harmless. Photos of cocktails, hotel lobbies, vague captions like, "Best nights are unplanned." Now, with context, those images pulsed with quiet betrayal. And the worst part was how smug it all seemed, how public and yet carefully coded. Like they'd known no one would ever suspect, least of all Emily. At night, when Nathan lay asleep beside her, she would stare at the ceiling, her mind calculating. Her heart no longer broke, it had crystallized into something cold and efficient. She no longer felt grief, she felt resolve. She started shifting money into a private account. Just small transfers at first, enough to be invisible to someone not paying attention. She made copies of joint paperwork, took photos of valuable items. And then, methodically, she began to dismantle the life they were building. The wedding was the first to go. Emily called the venue under the guise of a reschedule. No explanation given, just a polite but final cancellation. The florist, the photographer, the band, each call was made with the kind of calm that would later haunt those who thought they knew her. She used her work phone, left no voicemails, covered every trace. Nathan noticed her growing distance, but mistook it for stress. He tried to be supportive, offering late-night takeout, surprise flowers, even foot rubs. To Emily, it all felt like theater. The same hands that had held her sister, the same mouth that had whispered promises. It was almost laughable. He had no idea the woman sitting across from him at dinner was already gone. Emily also began crafting her exit. She booked a consultation with a real estate agent, expressing interest in short-term leases, furnished apartments, move-in ready, just for herself, just in case. She didn't tell friends, didn't post a thing. She lived two lives, one Nathan saw, and one she was building quietly, away from the wreckage. Then came the letters. She wrote them in the early hours of the morning, when the world was silent. One addressed to Nathan, one to Elena. She didn't write with emotion, she wrote with clarity. Each letter was a mirror, showing them who they really were. She described the moment she walked in and saw them together, not in detail, but with enough precision to cut. She listed the evidence she'd gathered, not to accuse, but to confirm. She didn't ask questions, she didn't demand apologies. She simply laid out the facts and explained what would happen next. But she didn't send them, not yet. Instead, she waited for the perfect moment, an occasion that would leave a mark, something they wouldn't forget. It came sooner than expected. Nathan's parents invited the entire family to a brunch the following weekend. It was meant to be a celebration of the upcoming wedding, a formal introduction between both sides before the big day. Emily saw the opportunity immediately. Everyone important would be there. A room full of people who thought they knew the story. She RSVP'd with a smile. On the morning of the brunch, Emily dressed carefully, ivory blouse, soft curls, a gold locket her mother had given her. She looked exactly as a bride-to-be should, serene, graceful, completely unsuspecting. She brought a gift, a neatly wrapped box with a simple bow. Inside were the 2 letters. When she arrived, Nathan greeted her with a kiss. Elena arrived shortly after, wearing a pastel dress and pretending, as always, to be innocent. Their parents chatted politely, glasses clinked, laughter echoed across the backyard patio. Emily watched it all as if through glass. She wasn't part of this world anymore. She was the architect of its unraveling. Halfway through brunch, she stood. She thanked the hosts, complimented the food, and turned to Nathan with a radiant smile. Then she handed him the gift box. The room hushed, expectant, a thoughtful surprise, perhaps a sentimental token from his bride-to-be. He opened it slowly, saw the 2 envelopes, read the names, and the color drained from his face. Elena, across the table, froze. No one else knew what was happening yet. Emily excused herself politely, said she wasn't feeling well, smiled, thanked everyone again, and walked out of that house with her head high. By the time they read the letters, she was already gone. The fallout was immediate. Nathan called dozens of times, texted, begged. Elena, too, tried to reach her, through mutual friends, through family. Emily didn't respond. She had said everything that needed to be said. The truth had been delivered with elegance and precision. And now, the silence would do the rest. Emily didn't return to her apartment that night, or the next. She had anticipated every possible reaction, every desperate attempt at damage control, the calls, the messages, the performative regret. But she was no longer reachable, not by phone, not through social media, not even through mutual friends who had been stunned into silence by the sudden rupture. She had become a phantom in her own story, slipping away before the debris hit the ground. She had checked into a short-term apartment 2 neighborhoods away, a place with minimal decoration and no emotional residue. The walls were blank, the furniture sterile, the air heavy with anonymity. It was exactly what she needed, a place to observe the world she'd left behind without being touched by it. Nathan's calls came in waves, initially frantic, then pitiful, then angry. He left voicemails thick with confusion, denial, and pleas for understanding. He accused her of overreacting. He tried to spin narratives, as if rewriting the story might erase its facts. Emily listened to each message only once, then archived them all in a digital folder labeled closure. Not for retribution, just for reference. Her days of confrontation were over. Elena's response was more erratic. Her texts bounced between guilt and defiance, desperation and self-pity. She sent long messages about sisterhood, about how things just happened, about being sorry but also feeling seen for the first time in years. Emily read them with a calm detachment. She no longer sought validation or understanding. Betrayal had clarified everything. In the days following the brunch, the web of their shared lives began to disintegrate. Word spread quickly among friends and family. At first there was confusion, no official announcement, no social media drama, just the sudden vanishing of a couple who had once seemed picture perfect. When questions began trickling in, Emily replied with a single sentence. I discovered something that made it impossible to continue. Nothing more. She didn't need to elaborate. The truth had a way of surfacing on its own. Nathan's family reached out with cautious sympathy. His mother sent a card, handwritten and tear-stained, expressing heartbreak over the situation and assuring Emily that she would always be welcome in their lives. Emily appreciated the sentiment, but never responded. She wasn't looking to preserve fragments of a life built on false promises. She started therapy. Not out of brokenness, but out of a desire to understand the parts of herself that had allowed the illusion to linger for so long. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Levin, was quiet and unintrusive. She didn't probe, she listened. Emily talked about trust, not just the kind given to others, but the kind one must have in their own instincts. She spoke of the moment she saw Nathan and Elena together, not as an explosion of grief, but as a door silently closing. Each session peeled away another layer of the experience. Not to re-traumatize, but to examine, to dissect, to ensure she never again ignored the signals that had once whispered truth into her bones. By the third week, the nightmares had stopped. By the fifth, she'd begun to sleep without interruption. Emily started running again. Each morning, before the city was fully awake, she laced up her shoes and disappeared into empty sidewalks and tree-lined paths. The rhythm soothed her, the forward motion mirrored her internal shift. She wasn't running from anything, she was running toward herself. She also went back to her passions: art museums, bookstores, coffee shops with no agenda. For the first time in years, she ate alone by choice and found it comforting. She wasn't healing through distraction, she was reclaiming solitude as a sanctuary, not a sentence. One afternoon she visited the vineyard where the wedding was supposed to happen. The owners had refunded most of the deposit after hearing the vague explanation she'd offered weeks earlier. She didn't go to relive the pain. She went to see what the place looked like without the weight of expectation. It was beautiful, just as she remembered. Rows of grapevines catching the light, a stillness that made every breath feel deeper. She stood on the stone terrace where she would have said her vows and realized something startling. She wasn't sad anymore. There was grief, yes, but it was the distant kind, the kind reserved for things that once had meaning but now lived only in memory, like a childhood home sold to strangers or a song once shared with someone now gone. The wedding dress remained in storage, untouched. It no longer represented failure. It was simply a garment meant for a moment that no longer existed. Emily made plans to donate it anonymously to a program that helped brides in difficult circumstances. It was never meant to be hers. Someone else could give it the life it was supposed to have. She didn't harbor hate, not for Nathan, not even for Elena. Anger was heavy, and Emily had carried enough. What remained was a quiet strength born from loss. She had looked into the darkest corners of trust and seen what betrayal really looked like. Not loud, but calculated. Not explosive, but patient. And she had walked away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Emily sat on the balcony of her temporary apartment, a glass of wine in hand, the city pulsing softly below. Her phone vibrated once, a new message from an unknown number, just 2 words: "I'm sorry." She didn't open it. Didn't need to. The story was over. She had turned the page. In the aftermath of everything she had lost, Emily found herself standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. Not devastation, but possibility. The life she had meticulously built had burned to ash, but in its place stood a clearing, empty, silent, ready. She had spent years defining herself by proximity to others, a loyal daughter, a dependable sister, a loving fiancé. But in the quiet that followed betrayal, she was no longer anyone's anything. And for the first time, she didn't mind. Rebuilding didn't begin with grand gestures, it began with small decisions. She bought a new journal, not the kind with floral covers or inspirational quotes. Just plain, matte black, unassuming. A blank canvas. She began each day by writing a single sentence about how she felt. Some mornings the sentence was hopeful, other times it was weary, but she wrote anyway, even when the words felt hollow. She also made a list, a real, handwritten list. of the things she had abandoned in the years spent catering to Nathan's needs and Elena's shadows. Things like pottery classes, road trips without a plan, reading novels not for productivity, but for pleasure. She made it a point to do at least one of those things each week. Therapy continued. Her sessions shifted from deconstruction to construction. Dr. Levin encouraged her to explore not just what she had survived, but what she wanted. The question was simple. The answer, not so much. Who was Emily Holloway without the titles? The answer came slowly. She started saying no more often, declining invitations that drained her, ignoring messages from people who only reached out for gossip or updates. She stopped apologizing for not replying right away. Her time became sacred, her space even more so. She reconnected with an old colleague who had moved to a different city years earlier. They exchanged voice notes about life, books, career shifts. It wasn't romantic, and that was the point. It was connection without expectation. Friendship born not of crisis, but of mutual curiosity. It reminded her that not all relationships demanded pieces of herself in return. Emily also changed careers, not drastically, but intentionally. She left her role in corporate marketing and took a position at a nonprofit that supported women navigating life transitions. Divorces, widows, single mothers starting over. At first, she wasn't sure she was ready to hear other people's pain so soon after surviving her own. But the work grounded her. Each story she heard was a mirror, a reminder that pain didn't make her fragile, it made her part of something vast and human. People started noticing the shift. Her mother, once devastated by the scandal between her daughters, reached out tentatively. Emily agreed to coffee, but on her terms. The conversation was strained but civil. There was no need to rehash what had happened. The lines had already been drawn. All that remained was mutual understanding. Some bonds, once broken, aren't meant to be repaired, only respected from a distance. Elena's name came up only once. Her mother mentioned that she was living in another state, working a new job, trying to start over. Emily nodded, indifferent. The past no longer pulled at her. She wasn't angry anymore, just uninterested. Nathan, too, faded away. His final attempt to reach out had come weeks earlier. A long email filled with blame masked as sorrow, revisionist history cloaked in self-pity. Emily didn't reply. She archived it with the rest, another document in a closed case file. Whatever guilt he carried would be his burden to bear. She had long since laid hers down. One Sunday morning, Emily wandered into a bookstore on impulse. She wasn't looking for anything, just air, maybe. Solitude wrapped in the scent of paper. She passed a table of poetry collections and stopped at a slim volume with a broken spine. Inside, a line was underlined in faded ink. "You do not have to be whole to begin again." She bought the book. She went home. She began again. By summer, Emily had signed a lease on a new apartment, this time a permanent one. It wasn't large, but it had light, big windows that welcomed the sunrise and hardwood floors that echoed when she walked barefoot. She filled it with plants and soft blankets, mismatched dishes and photographs from solo hikes. Nothing coordinated, nothing perfect, everything chosen with care. She threw a housewarming dinner for a small circle of new friends and old ones who had earned their place by simply showing up without asking for details. They toasted to fresh starts and burned sage by the windows. Emily laughed more that night than she had in months. After the guests left, she stood alone in the kitchen and realized she wasn't lonely. The absence of Nathan, of Elena, of the future she had once fought to preserve, it no longer hurt. It felt necessary. Like a forest fire that clears the undergrowth, painful but purifying. What had been taken from her no longer defined her. What remained was her own. The final box she unpacked held the wedding album that never was. Mock-up pages, sample layouts, swatches of lace. She sifted through them in silence, unmoved. Then she placed them in a cardboard bin and drove to a donation center. She didn't need a ceremonial burning or a dramatic farewell. Let someone else repurpose the pieces. She had no use for them anymore. Life continued. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And in the quiet of a Saturday morning, with coffee in her hand and sunlight pouring through the window, Emily Holloway realized something she hadn't dared to believe for a long time. She was happy, not in spite of the betrayal, but because she had survived it and rebuilt something truer in its place. There's a certain silence that comes after the storm has passed, not empty, but deliberate. It's the kind that doesn't ask for explanation or apology. Emily had found that silence, and in it she discovered something else: peace. One evening, as she browsed through old photos on her laptop, searching not for memories but for files to delete, she found a folder labeled Wedding Vision. Inside were images of dresses, floral arrangements, table settings. Emily stared at them with curiosity, as if they belonged to someone else. And in a way, they did. She didn't feel sorrow, only detachment, like reading a book she once loved but no longer related to. The folder was moved to trash, and then permanently deleted. That part of my life is over. Years from now, Emily imagined, she might tell her story. Not as gossip, not for sympathy, but as a quiet reminder that sometimes the people who betray us do us a favor. They free us from lives we were never meant to live. If that moment ever came, she would end the story like this. She saw them together. She walked away. She never looked back. And that decision, not the betrayal, is what changed everything.